Hello everyone and welcome back to Lindsay Unfiltered, and today we're going to be doing a book review of Shari Franke's The House of My Mother. Now, I spent some time reading this book, picking out segments of it that were insightful to me. If you guys don't know who Shari Franke is the eldest daughter of convicted child abuser Ruby Franke. Ruby Franke and her co-defendant Jodi Hildebrandt had Ruby's children doing unspeakable things. When I say this, I mean they were laboring from sunup to sundown with only 10 minutes in between, sleeping on concrete, not eating, not drinking, and they were being very badly abused, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. There was a lot of religious scrupulosity behind the abuse, and the children were, in my opinion, blessed to make it out alive. Now, Shari, being the eldest daughter of Ruby Franke, kind of walks us through what it's like being a child in Ruby's home, before and after meeting Jodi Hildebrandt. I just wanted to preface the video with that so you guys know what we're getting into. If you guys haven't seen my video on Ruby Franke's journal, where it outlines a specific abuse that Ruby Franke did to her own children, I suggest you go and watch that. I feel like it is important to see the things in the journal. It makes the book that much more understandable. Without further ado, let's dive into The House of My Mother. In chapter 1, Sealed, Shari talks about how her mother, Ruby, came from a very strict background. A lot of responsibility was placed on Ruby, and she couldn't wait to have that responsibility to pass down to her own children. In chapter 1, she says, "For Ruby, motherhood wasn't just a future role. It was the pinnacle of her aspirations, the one thing she had always wanted for herself above all else." That lets us know that being a mother was a vital role to Ruby's existence. But if being a mother was a vital role to Ruby's existence, why did she treat her children the way she treated them? That's the part that makes no sense to me. Shari goes on to explain it like this. In chapter 1, she says, "Ruby's entire self-worth was built on exceptionalism. So if she couldn't be extraordinary, then what was the point? She needed a new dream, a fresh source of validation. If music wouldn't define her greatness, then motherhood would. Cherubic faces to beam up at her with the love of adoration she craved. Blank slates, ready to be inscribed with her wisdom, her values, her Rubiness." So I think it's interesting that Shari talks about how Ruby wanted to inscribe a lifestyle upon her children. She wanted to be the type of mother that had perfect children. That's what I'm getting from this discussion in chapter 1. I'm also getting the fact that Shari is an amazing writer. I can actually feel her pain through her words as I'm reading this. The words she uses to describe the pain, the trauma, the experience, they fit perfectly, right? Shari then goes into how her mother wasn't very nurturing to her as a child, like you would expect most mothers to be about their babies or their children. They're very nurturing, very coddling. She didn't get that much from Ruby. She explains that as, why would she? Her family's philosophy has always been that it doesn't hurt a baby to cry things out. Babies shouldn't be coddled. Tantrums should not be tolerated. It's for their own good, so they know who's boss. And when they grow up, they can learn to handle whatever life throws at them without being weak, losers, or crybabies. So tears didn't hurt Ruby's feelings. When her children cried, that didn't hurt her feelings. It meant her no never mind, right? We knew that when on her 8 Passengers channel, she said something to the effect of, "My daughter forgot her lunch. I'm not sending her one, and I hope the teacher doesn't get her one." So you rather your child be hungry? That was a red flag right then and there. She was so upset that her daughter didn't bring her lunch, that she didn't want anybody else to feed her either. She would rather her go hungry. In chapter 2, Teardrops, Shari talks about how she had to learn at a young age to keep her emotions inside, right? There would be no sharing with family. There would be no showing emotion or showing sadness or expecting to have a family to lean on, or a nurturing mother for that matter. In chapter 2, she says, even before I could form words or thoughts, was I learning that my pain didn't matter? That my needs were inconvenient if my tears had been met with comfort instead of calculated indifference? Would I have grown into someone more open, less guarded? Every time she'd go to Ruby crying, there was never any comfort there. There was never any nurturing there. So that's the conclusion I've reached for Ruby as a mother, as a parent overall. No nurturing, no compassion for any of her 6 children. Not a nurturing bone in her body. Not a compassionate bone in her body. And if you don't have that, how are you able to parent effectively? You can't, right? In chapter 3, Shari starts to talk about the abuse that she faced from Ruby Franke when she was very, very young. Small things turn into bigger things to just keep her in her place. In chapter 3, Shari says, I quickly learned that anything less than unbridled enthusiasm would trigger Ruby into a rage. One hint of displeasure on my face and whack. A smack on my arm, a flick to my lips, or a sharp tug on my ear. I rarely cried when Ruby punished me. Only one person in this house was allowed to shed tears, and it wasn't me. So I kept quiet, maintained a neutral expression, but beneath that calm exterior, a realization was taking root. Mommy isn't very nice to me. Later on in that chapter, Shari talks about how she has to be pliable. I love the word she uses here. She says, if her mother's having a bad day, she has to know how to bend into shape for that bad day. She has to know how to act to fit a different Ruby mood. She has to be a pliable child. She cannot step on her mother's toes. Even as a child, she felt as if she was walking on eggshells with her mother, that her mother was looking for her to do something wrong. In chapter 3, she says, looking back, I marvel at how quickly my young mind adapted to Ruby's moods. At 5, I knew my place instinctively. Be pliable, be obedient, shape and mold myself into whatever form would earn Ruby's conditional affection. I was a plant straining toward the sun, contorting myself into unnatural shapes just to catch a ray of her approval. When you're watering a plant and it's just trying to get that little bit of sun and it moves toward it. She's describing this as her relationship with her mother. That was perfect imagery. And that's what I mean by you can feel Shari Franke's emotions through the book. I suggest you guys check it out in full, right? In chapter 4, Shari starts to talk about how she knows that being a mother means a lot to Ruby, or the perception of being a mother means a lot to Ruby. Until Shari herself was a mother, she didn't feel like she could connect to Ruby on any level. She says, Ruby and I couldn't be real friends until I was a woman with a husband and a family of my own. Until I was her equal. Just as Ruby had to become a wife and mother to truly earn her own mother's respect, I too would have to do the same. I would have to wait to be loved. She would have to wait to be loved. You have to wait to be loved. You had to wait to hit this benchmark to be loved by your mother. And if you didn't hit it at the exact right angle, you're a failure. That is rough, right? In chapter 6, Ruby's Rage, we start to see Shari expound on that rage, on that anger that can be found inside of Ruby. Before this, she kind of just talked about the tugging on the ear, the popping on the lips when she was a little kid, but She goes into a little bit more detail in chapter 6, saying, Ruby's hand would often find its way to my face, a sharp sting of displeasure delivered with precision. Her slaps were calibrated, never hard enough to leave visible bruises, at least on me, but always sufficient to instill fear. In her twisted logic, she was molding obedience, sculpting compliance with each stinging blow. I also think we were just her punching bag, a way for her to release her anger. She'd always seemed calmer when she'd blown off some steam on us. Sculpting compliance. These are the types of words that put you in that situation, right? So I have to give it to Shari Franke with just the beautiful choice of words here, right? In chapter 7, Refuge, Shari begins to talk about how her parents don't do a lot to make her feel secure in her own skin. She's always doing something wrong. She is something wrong to them. Imagine living in a household, and I'm sure some of you have lived in households like this, where anything you do is a constant disappointment to your parents. Anything you try to do is a constant disappointment to your parents growing up. Because in all actuality, they aren't happy within, or they want you to live life by their code of ethics. And if you don't live your life by their code of ethics, then they're upset. So Ruby and her husband, Kevin, talk down on Shari. She says in chapter 7, Mom and Dad pulled me into their room tonight. They said that all of my friend problems in school were all my fault. They said I'm not a fun person to be around. And nobody gets me, which may be true. Then they said it seems like I try on purpose to annoy my family. But the truth is, I just don't enjoy being around them. Ruby and Kevin are the ones who annoy me. Completely justified, right? Your parents, in some cases, follow me kids, can be your first bully, right? When people who are not supposed to be parents become parents, they tend to take it out on the children. When people who are not supposed to be parents become parents, who didn't want to become parents, become parents, they take it out on their children. That's deep. That's hard. That's deep. But it's true, right? And in a lot of cases, a lot of the people having children today are not ready. Mentally, financially, spiritually, they're not ready. But the heart within them, the sanity within them makes them ready, right? And that's what Ruby Franke lacked. Okay? In chapter 10, Remodeling Reality, Shari starts to talk about how they got to creating a YouTube channel. Apparently, some of Ruby's sisters were doing it as well. It was kind of like a family vlogging thing. And Ruby saw it and said, hey, I have kids. I do homely mom stuff. Let's make a YouTube channel, right? And they had to put on a good front for YouTube. And they did. Because they had so many followers. Millions of people tuned in to watch them. Millions, right? And in chapter 10, Shari describes it as something like this. The result was a picturesque facade, perfect for the camera, but perhaps a bit too perfect for real life. A visible symbol from our transition to an ordinary family to YouTube stars. So that tells me that Shari Franke, Ruby Franke, Kevin Franke, Chad Franke, all the Frankies put on a united front for YouTube and presented as this family that was well intact, when under the surface there were some issues there. Under the surface there were issues, but no one was ever looking to go outside of the family to speak out about it at that time, in my opinion. Now, all the things that I've said in this video have been my opinion and my opinion only. Please do not go basing this off of fact. I am just going off of the words that I read and my connection to the book, okay? I will be doing more parts because I want to do a deep dive of the book. Okay, I want to give you guys a deep dive of the book like we did for Gypsy Rose, right? So follow along with the series. I'm pretty sure you guys will really enjoy it. But for now, that's where I'm going to leave it at on chapter 10. This is the Shari Franke, House of My Mother extended book review. I really appreciate you guys for coming through. If you like content like this that revolves around scandal, true crime, conspiracy with a twist of humor, hit the subscribe button, hit the subscribe button, hit the subscribe button. I go live some days. I do shorts. I post videos. I do it all, guys. And I really appreciate all 2,373 of you. Thank you guys so much. This has been Lindsay Unfiltered. Bye now.